I'm here with Rob Fetters, and we're going to be talking a little bit about guitars today. Lots of guitars, as you can see in the background. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Well, you talked before about the guitars and how you said, like, hey, it doesn't have to be fancy if it's a cheap guitar and it plays well. But you obviously find lots of, someone that doesn't play guitar. And I don't play guitar. Well, I'm trying to. I bought a guitar 15 years ago, still trying to learn. And as recently as this weekend, I'm trying to learn my three chords again. The three chords that write thousands of songs. I'm trying. My C, my F, and my G chord. I'm trying, but I'll get there. But I mean, you have. I counted. I went back and watched the live stream again just to go back and count those guitars, and there were 13 of them I see, plus a ukulele, in that room, and there's probably many more stashed away somewhere else. But I mean, it's like that's even though you say, hey, cheap guitar, good. There's something different between each one. There's definitely something different that you like about each one, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't have any. There's ones, I do have, just recently, I kind of made a clone of a guitar that I like a lot. But yeah, when I grew up, I actually had like a 1956 Stratocaster. I had a 63 Stratocaster. And at the time, it was like the 70s. So they weren't that old then.
Right.
Take the neck off one and put it on the other. One had a blonde neck, one had a rosewood, and it's terrible what I did to those guitars. Mix and match them, take a pickup out of one. But so I didn't respect them like I should have, but I played the hell out of them. And those guitars eventually got stolen. I've had a couple moments where everything was stolen. One time everything in the band was in a flood in Cincinnati. The warehouse where we were rehearsing got flooded, and the stuff that was above the flood line, we moved to another room. The stuff that survived the flood, we moved to another room in the big warehouse. That room got robbed. So I've lost everything. And then the Psychodots had a similar experience where everything in our van, it wasn't every guitar I had, but everything we had to play out got stolen. So it was almost spiritual. When you get wiped out like that, it was a kind of a spiritual experience in the sense that you learn, nothing lasts forever. Life is loss. Eventually we lose life itself, but everything in our life, we're going to lose it. So I decided then and there I was never going to own a guitar that I couldn't just go to a music store and get another one, if I lost it. And I completely failed at that, because what happens eventually is, 3 years down the line, somebody calls you from a music store and says, Rob, I know you always wanted an old Martin, and there's a really beat up one here. And hell, I think you could get it out of here for $250. It's going to need a repair or two. Do you want it? And okay, so suddenly I've got a 1967 Martin 0018 guitar. It's vintage. It's all beat up, but it stays in tune. It sounds great. So but all my guitars are different. And like there's a 12-string Guild back there. It's not rare, but it's old. When I turned 40, Psychodots gave me a 1972 P-Bass, vomit green. It was called Antigua. It's one of the most disgusting finished jobs in the history of guitars, and now greatly prized by people for its disgustingness. But really, it's similar to baby diarrhea, that kind of greenish, yellowish tint, baby diarrhea. There's the mark. I've got a Robert Godin, Canadian nylon guitar that I use. The painted guitar is just a Strat Plus from the 90s. God, that's actually like old now, but it wasn't old.
That's scary to think about, isn't it? That is scary to think about.
Yeah. And you know, and I tear guitars apart. It has Spurzels on it. It doesn't have the original pickups on it or anything anymore. It's got a Kaler, like a heavy metal guitar player, twang bar on it, stays in tune. Adrian and I used those a lot in the 80s. And a Taylor guitar, that's kind of an expensive guitar, but I got a good deal on it. It wasn't that good when I got it, but it's about it's about 18 years old now. It's starting to sound good. And what else do I have? Is this interesting? Should I go
Yeah,
through
no,
my
I love it. I was hoping you would do this. I was really hoping that this would be the room of the interview.
Yeah,
Yes.
I probably should pick them up, but so, and there's a parts caster. There's a guitar that a luthier named David Snyder, who from Cincinnati, but he works in Woodstock now, New York. He built. It's wonderful. That's a really nice guitar. There's a nice story with this. I've got a Duo Sonic, a 1959 Duo Sonic that I owned 30 years ago when I was in the Raisins, and I needed to sell it to pay the rent, to eat. And our sound man bought it from me for $225, George Corneliuson.
Wow.
And I sold it to him. And of course I had seller's remorse down the line, but about, I don't know, 15 years ago, he called me and he said, you know, I'm trying to thin out the ranks here and I've got this guitar. Do you want it back? And I said, oh, well, sure, George. And he sold it back to me for $225.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's the pink, it was stripped. It's not like, you know, exact, but the neck and body and tuning heads and stuff are still a lovely 1970. It's hard to know whether Gibsons of this period, what exact year there. It's either a 70 or 71 SG, kind of like a Derek Trucks style.
Okay, sure. Mm-hmm.
It's fitted like a Derek Trucks SG. And that was one, a guy at Groon. We were in Groon's Guitar in Nashville. And it's funny, all guitars have stories. So we're looking at guitars. We're looking at SG Juniors, like I talked about Leslie West.
Right.
And I was looking at these and talking to the salesman, and I said, God, man, this guitar costs $4,000. This is beginners guitars when I was growing up, because they're great. They're small guitars, and I was just saying, man, you know, I came here looking for you know, a good guitar for my son, who is starting to be a serious guitar player, really into it. He was in middle school, and I wanted to get him a good guitar, and realized we weren't going to get it at Groon's. And the salesman was talking to me, and he said, so who's this for? And I said, well, it's for my son. Here's Robert III right there. And he said he's been mowing lawns all summer, just like I did to, you know,
Right.
get guitars. And he said, well, if I got you a good guitar, would you promise you're not going to just flip it? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a guitar dealer or anything. And yeah, I promise. What are you thinking? He said, I got an SG at home. I'll sell it to your son for $900, but your karma is going to go really bad if you sell it. And I said, no sweat. And he said, do you want to try it out or anything? And I said, no, I think I trust you. So Robert had $450 saved up. I matched it. We got it. So that SG cost $900, and it's worth a few thousand. It was worth a few thousand then. But Robert at this point doesn't really like that guitar so much, so it's there, but I don't feel like I own it. You know, he's a Strat guy. I got him a Strat. We did kind of a trade, but he knows he's got it whenever.
It's on
Whenever,
loan to dad right now. It's on loan in case you need it for something. It's right there, right?
yeah, oh God, yeah, it's
You
just
can come
unknown
in
to me.
and
Yeah. Then there's a 1965 Rickenbacker 625, which is a fancy. It's just a beautiful guitar. It's the one that's on the cover of Car Caught Fire, the Bears, and that one I didn't pay a lot for, but it was like, I don't know, at least 20 years ago. I got that one from and the reason I always wanted that guitar is because another guitar player from my hometown, Sylvania, Ohio, had one in junior high school. Our friend Al Kern, we all hated him because he had the prettiest, coolest. I mean, a Rickenbacker. The Beatles play Rickenbackers.
yeah.
We were so jealous of him, and when I saw that and saw that maybe I could get it, I it was on eBay, and then it went off eBay, but I tracked it down and called the music store in Northern California. I said, "What happened to that guitar?" And he said, "Nobody bought it." And I said, "How's it play?" And he said, "God, it plays like butter." And I said, "I'll buy it." "Well, I don't know if I want to sell it." And I said, "Oh, you should sell it." So I talked him into selling it to me. So that's pretty much the guitars. The Les Paul's a nice, a good story. That was really involved because a friend of mine, a fan of the band, a woman who I knew her when she was like in high school. She would come see the Raisins play, and we would talk and stuff. We were friends. She was younger than me. I didn't date her or anything like that. But beautiful girl. And I think everybody in the band would have, but we were, no. So in that way, we weren't like Led Zeppelin. She sent me a guitar. She sent me a beautiful guitar. She became a very successful money manager, bond person in New York. And out of the blue, she sent a guitar, and she just said, "I got a huge bonus. I've been listening to your records. I just thought you might like this." She went into Rudy's and they sold her a beautiful guitar. And it was a guitar that didn't really fit me. It was a little too, it was like too nice for me. It was a Paul Reed Smith, beautiful, great sounding guitar. I don't know why it wasn't my guitar, but I didn't feel like it fit me. And she said, "If you want to trade this for something vintage or something, do it." And I said, "Are you sure about that?" And she said, "Yeah." So I sold it, and a friend of mine had this black Les Paul. He had gotten it. He worked at a vintage store, guitar store in Cincinnati, and I was there with my sons looking for a Les Paul. I couldn't find a new one that was good. I had a Les Paul when I was a kid, but I hadn't had a Les Paul since I was a kid. And I just couldn't find a new one off the rack that I thought was a good guitar. And I saw this one at the music store, and it wasn't for sale. He bought it. It was all beat up. It had a broken neck. He called it old broke ass. And it looked like it had been burnt, and it smelled really bad. It smelled like an ashtray, like a bowling alley ashtray. But it played like greased lightning. It's a fretless wonder. Frets are very small, really easy to make mistakes on it because your fingers will just it's almost like there's no frets on it. Nothing stops you from screwing up.
Yeah.
And I said, "How come you can't get guitars like this anymore?" He said, "I don't know, but you can't." And Rob, it's not for sale. And I called him a month later and I said, "Is it still not for sale?" And he was having trouble with it because it's, like I said, it's kind of a dangerous machine.
Yeah.
If you played it and nothing else all day, you'd get used to it. But it's kind of like the difference between driving, I don't know, you know, I don't know, a Honda Fit and a Tesla. You know,
Yeah.
just as far as, whew, and we're off, you know. He said, you know, I'm thinking about selling it. And I said, well, when you're done thinking, please call me first. And he said, I know. And we're good friends. We're good friends.
Yeah.
So I laid off him for about another 10 days. And I called him again and I said, come on. And he sold it to me. So that's the story of Broke Ass. I've cleaned it. I've tried to clean it up. It's the finish is ruined on it. Fell over. And it's really beat up. He bought it in, I've got a capo on at the moment. The way it's worn and everything, that wasn't sanded down. That was the guy that played it. It's really beat up and just wonderful. It's just great. Just it's a badass guitar. And it's a 1974 20th anniversary. Randy Rhoads played a 20th anniversary. This is what he played.
Really?
Yeah. He played a white one. This is a black one. Still made in Kalamazoo. These guitars aren't that expensive because they were built in what is called the Norlin era of Gibson when the company was sold. And people say the quality went down, but this was built by the same guys in Kalamazoo that were building guitars in the 60s and late 50s. And it's a fantastic guitar. So that's that one. But then back to really cheap guitars. Oops. This is the big find for me. This is a made in Mexico 2010.
Okay.
Road worn Telecaster. When these came out, they cost $400. They've got, you know how jeans are kind of worn out. You know, you get them
Sure. Yeah.
holes in the stuff.
Yep.
And if you look at them, you go to the Gap and you see them. They're always, the holes are in the same place and everything. They're always destroyed.
Pre-planned holes on the jeans. Yeah.
Yeah, all these guitars are, you know, worn out in exactly the same places, including the neck, you know. And it turns out that they were built using computers that modeled after guitars of the 50s. So it's an image, and the craftsmen, because there were craftsmen involved in this, in across the border from California, picked out really good wood, same wood that 50s Tellys and 60s Tellys and Stratocasters. They made a series of these, and they were they're just incredibly great guitars. And we all dissed them when they came out because of the fakeness of them. And I forgot about them. And I was at another friend's house, a guy who was a creative director at an ad agency that I had worked for. And I was looking at he was a Telly man. He had like 12 Telecasters on the wall. And I said, what's that one? That's a cool looking guitar. I forgot. And he said, oh, that's one of those fake old Mexican Tellys. And I said, oh, and I played it and fell in love with it and talked him into selling it to me. So, and I love it. I mean, it sounds great. It sustains. It does some stuff that just nothing but a Telecaster can do. And they're still fairly inexpensive. They've actually doubled in price. And most guitars don't do that in 10 years. But you can still get one for $800. And I think they're, I mean, I'd take that over a $2,000 telly.
You know, that's the point I was going to make about what you just said right there about that over a $2,000 telly. You know, is that obviously from everything you've described with these guitars, it doesn't have to be that guitar that is thousands of dollars and in a glass case. You're not going to play it. You know what I mean? And these instruments, they all have a story. They all like are people in a sense. They all have a story. And from the dent, so I remember I got that dent because I was playing the show and I turned around and I, you know, and I mean things like that you can't write those stories. They just happen in life. And I would think that that's what makes them so special. All the stories you've told on these, much more important than buying a factory direct guitar that the latest people are talking about. Yeah.
Well, God, yeah. And that's the thing. I don't have a high opinion of guitar collectors. I'll say it. I'm going to offend somebody now. I hate that. I mean, it's just like, are you kidding me? You've got a 1958 Les Paul and it's on a wall and you're afraid to play it.
Right. Exactly.
You're just playing it.
Exactly.
All my guitars I use and this telly, I have to say, is just a while back, another friend of mine went crazy on all these road worn guitars, and he just, when he sees one, he buys one because they stopped after Fender realized that they were making these amazing instruments that rivaled their custom shop. They changed them a little. They weren't as good.
Right.
And so he buys them and he said, you know, you love that telly. Do you want another one? And it was really cheap. You know, it was like, you know, it hadn't. He just wanted to. He was just trying to move them. You know, so he sold me another one that's pretty much identical, maybe a year older than this one, and I adjusted and everything. I'm probably going to give it to one of my kids or something, you know.
Sure.
But I don't want to have a guitar I don't play. It's sad. It's sad to pick up a guitar and it's kind of out of whack.
Yeah.
And the strings are all old on it and stuff like that. That it makes me sad. I want to use this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if these guitars could talk and all the things that they've seen, they could tell a lot more stories than a guitar that's hanging on a hook in the wall. That's for sure.
The countless mistakes I've made, the blunders I've made playing them. It's just, they're horror stories. Actually, maybe they're torture stories. I don't know. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I secretly was hoping that our interview would happen to take place in the room where you had all the guitars and you'd get to talk about them. So thank you for feeding right into that. That just was wonderful. I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah. You know, the people get all tweaky cork sniffing like wine aficionados or something. Cigar aficionados with guitars and pickups and stuff like that. And yet, you know, when I saw Jimi Hendrix, he was picking up brand new Stratocasters that probably were not really adjusted very well or anything like that. Because by then Fender was already giving him guitars. He had a bunch of Strats on stage, and it didn't matter what he played. You know, it was going to sound great. And the Beatles were the same way.
Right.
You know, they got free guitars. They played them. There's a lot more involved in getting a good guitar sound than. I mean, pickups are important, tuning heads are important and stuff like that. But, you know, I always come back to the main thing. Will this thing stay in tune for the duration of this recording set or this performance? You know, that's number one. And that's just where I'm at with it. So in that sense, I can get really snooty about in my way, I'm snooty about snoots.
Well, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about how sometimes, you know, you can go to I don't do this. I'm living on a middle class income, you know, but I mean, like, you know, a person can go to a fancy wedding or a fancy restaurant and the plate is, you know, this $100 plate and it's got this tiny piece of meat and a leaf on the top. and it's got this in the side, and people go, oh, this is amazing, this is amazing. And I'm thinking, just give me a burger or a slice of pizza and I'm happy, you know? And that's kind of how I equate what you're saying in a sense, because it's like, you know, just a gently used or lovingly used guitar to me would make so much more of a difference than something that has not, like you said, not even broken in or played or adjusted. And I always laugh at that. You always wonder if you put two guitars next to each other and told somebody that knew nothing about guitars specifically, this one costs $5,000, this one costs 200, and you don't tell them which one is which. And but you lead them in that direction. Would they be able to sort that out, or just because it's $5,000, is it better to them? You know, I always think about those kinds of things, analytical, like you said. You know.
Oh yeah. You know, if any of your, if this goes, any guitar players or musicians, keyboard players, whatever, if there's a chance to see the exhibit, there was an exhibit last year at the Metropolitan Museum of Art last summer.
Okay.
Of instruments of rock, and they had like Jimi Hendrix is a great collector of his. He takes care of his own stuff. So they had not Jimmy Page. They've got the Led Zeppelin stage setup from the 70s.
Wow,
you know, the Zozo
amazing
amplifiers and his guitars. And, you know, one of them is a Dan Electro. I mean, it's made like with particle board. He did incredible stuff. His acoustic guitar is a Harmony Sovereign, which is a cheap acoustic guitar. That's what he played Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You on. It's what he did. All the acoustic stuff on the second and third Zepp albums, and maybe more. He still uses it. You'll see Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar, and I'm bringing this up because the exhibit moved to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, which we can't go to now, but I think it'll be there. It's amazing to look at these guitars, to look at Muddy Waters, Chicago, okay? Muddy Waters Telecaster.
Yeah.
All those guys, I mean, they screwed around with those guitars.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are original. Stevie Ray Vaughan's, the SRV Strat, it's fascinating to get, it's great because you can get this close to it, you know? And you see he had these weird little wire protectors on the strings by the bridge so they wouldn't snap off where strings bend on a Strat. I'd never seen that before. That was not an original Fender thing.
Right.
They're all adjusted and beat up, and it's fun to get that close to a guitar because, you know, you're looking at it like that and you're kind of drooling and you're so excited because you remember when you saw him play that guitar or whatever, and then you hear this voice to the side, and, you know, like I was doing it with a Jerry Garcia guitar. I was looking at one of the Wolves, I think they're called, and I just heard this voice go, a total stranger go, I saw him play that guitar 5 times. And I looked at him and I said, were you a deadhead? And he said, I was a deadhead. I'm still a deadhead. You know, I made a new friend, you know, and a total stranger in New York. But you know, we were just taught, and then we just would go on, and, you know, and I'd say, I saw the Allman Brothers. I saw Dwayne play that guitar, and, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's where it's fun. It's so much fun. I can't stand it.
And I think right now the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is doing a lot of online tours of all sorts of stuff and collections. And I feel like I almost even read something about the Led Zeppelin set, possibly, because that sounds familiar. So they're doing, and I know they have some kind of thing where you can be a virtual member too for a couple of days, really for a reasonable price, to maybe see things in the archives that they haven't put on the shelves. They talk about.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, what does that have to do with rebellion and rock and roll? And I went, and my wife had to drag me out of there at the end of the day. It wasn't about who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was, here are the instruments.
It was the history, the historical things that were on this. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here's the little granny sweater that Keith Richards wore at Altamont. Yeah. You know, and I'm looking at that thing. that, because he looked like such a badass pirate, you know,
Uh,
in pictures of it and everything, and all the drama surrounding it. And I'm looking at this thing, and that looks like something my Aunt Harriet would have worn, you know. Uh, you know, and it dawned on me, oh, he wears girls' clothes. You know, this pirate wears girls' clothes. I can dig that. I was in a band in the 80s, so I wore girls' clothes sometimes too. Fun with clothes. But yeah, oh God, I love that stuff. And you can see, I remember I saw the second Telecaster ever made. The design of it, very primitive, but still a Telecaster is primitive. But that exhibit was mind blowing. Like Keith Emerson's keyboards, the organ that he would pull on top of himself and then push back. I mean, how the hell, and keep playing and stick knives in. It even had knives in it. It was
Really?
that instant. And I could see it was on this like kind of roller thing. So it actually wouldn't crush him. But I saw him play. I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer play, and in a kind of, might have been their first or second U.S. tour in Detroit. So I saw him play that, and his wall of ARP synthesizers and all that kind of
And then
stuff.
across the room was Carl playing his drums. And I mean, I never got to see them live but I did see Carl do I think he might have been touring with Asia at the time or something. I think it probably was. And he'd done a drum solo. And, you know, I love melodies. I love harmonies. And, you know, the drum solo is always, okay, cool. But I got to tell you, I was captivated. Every little thing, every tiny finger symbol, every hand symbol, every drum, every hi-hat around this, he used every one of them in this drum solo. And I was close. It was a place like we talked about the Vic before, you know, it was a small place like that. It might have even been the Vic, to be honest. It was maybe the Park West. Did you guys ever play at the Park West in Chicago when you were?
Oh yeah, great,
So,
great one on you. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about how intimate that is. It was a place like that. It was either the Park West or the Vic. And doing that drum solo, I was just, and I'm not a drummer. You know, I'm not. I love my melodies. And I just was captivated. So in the same world that there's Keith across the room when they toured together all those years with all those synthesizers, here's Carl with those drums and just amazing equipment and how he used every single one. I watched him methodically use every one.
And yeah, one of the things I liked about Carl Palmer, I remember, is just he sounded good.
Yeah.
Not every drummer sounded good.
That's true.
They played great, but yeah, he had those suckers were tuned.
Yeah.
They were, really great musicians.